Hello and welcome. My name is Leah, and my case study in digital asset management is focused on the Erving Public Library in Erving, Massachusetts. So let's talk a little background. The Erving Public Library, or EPL for short, is situated in the small rural town of Erving, Mass, in Franklin County, east of Greenfield and northwest of the Quabbin Reservoir. Its population is tiny. There were only 1,665 people living in Erving in 2020. The library itself was initially 2 branches, which were founded in 1882. It originated as a subscription-based library, charging residents 50 cents quarterly. Eventually, the fee was dropped when a woman named Sarah Holton Ballou donated a substantial amount of books to the library. The provision of the donating being the library must be made a free public library. Over the years, the library became more popular and the town realized it needed a larger, modernized library. So, in 2019, a new library was built and the 2 branches consolidated into one. Another thing to note is that while most libraries can be considered basically perpetually underfunded, small rural public libraries are usually particularly strained in resources. Right now, the EPL only employs 3 people: Director Abigail Baines, Assistant Director Jean Daly, and Youth Services Librarian Andrea DeLulis. The library is also only open 30 hours per week, and the total FY24 budget was $237,095. This is an extreme limitation, and it attests to the community's smallness. For reference, the public library in Webster, Massachusetts, which has a population of almost 18,000, has a budget of $508,100. And the Boston Public Library, serving over 600,000, spends roughly $70.1 million per year. However small the library is, it still has big ambitions when it comes to providing excellent services to its patrons. What's important to the community is important to the library, and they put in every effort to provide for the diverse needs of the patron base. In this case, Baines mentions town history is incredibly important to their patrons. This means the history collection, and making it more accessible online, is still an essential service that requires attention by staff, despite limited time and resources to work with it. This means the EPL does actually have a good amount of digitized material online. Baines notes this is the historical material that was used most often, thus it was only logical to digitize them and make them accessible online. EPL stores its digital items on the Digital Commonwealth, a database and organization dedicated to preserving Massachusetts history online. The EPL has 2 collections in Digital Commonwealth. The first is its gravestone rubbing collection, which consists of 44 gravestone rubbing framed prints made by a community member named Doris Felton. These prints capture the odd and eerie traditional style of early New England graves, with depictions of angels and phrases like "memento mori" and "my glasses run." The second collection is of 20 photographs, all of which depict various sites and subjects in Erving. Just to give you a better idea, these are more examples of the gravestone rubbings. I chose the EPL mainly based on its status as a public library. I have worked in public libraries for over 10 years, and I am always fascinated by the odd little historical collections that they seem to amass rather haphazardly over the years. No matter how scattered or seemingly trivial the collections are, community members seem to flock to them, as they are always fascinated by their own histories and draw pleasure from learning about their own town's past. But public libraries don't typically have the same resources that large museums and archives do, and their focuses are usually elsewhere. That is, on modern-day collections that appeal to everyday readers. With that in mind, initially I wondered how extremely small public libraries navigate the budgetary restrictions placed upon them, specifically in terms of managing digital assets. Also, is digital asset management even a worthy endeavor for libraries like Erving? One might assume that since resources are so limited, librarians' time would be better spent on other services, like programming, reference, and technology. Essentially, why would we waste time on something so low on the priority list? But my questions also evolved as the project went on. They shifted as I learned more about the EPL, and eventually my major question was not whether digital asset management should happen, but rather how it happens, and how is the community involved? More on this soon. My initial project plan was this. I had a timeline in mind. I would draft and submit interview questions, solidify plans with chosen institutions, gather data, submit my capsule summary, assess project, submit my rough data analysis, work on presentation and report, and submit presentation. All nice and tidy. I also believed that I would gather data through multiple in-person interviews. Of course, though, projects tend to have challenges that don't always go to plan. For one, I had a lot of difficulty actually getting a library to commit to the project. Erving was not my original choice, and I went through planning for different libraries about 3 times. I think it's important to remember that librarians do not have a lot of time. Along with underfunding comes overworking. It's important as a researcher to be flexible and able to pivot if your original idea does not work out. Also, make sure to reach out to libraries far in advance and always have backup plans. Timing, even after locking down a library, was also a really big struggle. Because both I and my interviewee, library director Abigail Baines, operated on very tight schedules, we found a written asynchronous mode of interviewing to be most effective for us. Finally, the actual data from these interviews yielded interesting observations. One, as I suspected, small rural libraries face unique challenges when it comes to digital asset management. Namely, financials, time, and staffing were the biggest barriers. But more unexpectedly, the EPL was able to a certain extent, solve these problems using creative methods. Thus, a unique organization uses unique problem-solving skills. Secondly, for libraries like the EPL, their community ended up being their lifeline. As Baines notes, community members were catalysts in the digitization of the EPL's gravestone robbings, and even completed much of the digitizing themselves. Finally, even small libraries have big ambitions when it comes to digital asset management. According to Baines, the library soon hopes to apply for a grant that would allow them to digitize more of their historical photographs. She believes these photographs are viable examples for the history of photography, which she notes will age and fade. Digitizing them, she hopes, could preserve those objects for study. So is digitizing worth it for the EPL? From what I've gathered, it is. The EPL's historical collection is valuable to its patrons. This is why they volunteered their time to preserving it. And what's important to patrons should always, within reason, be a priority for the library. For the future, I suggest the EPL lean on the community and get the townspeople involved. The community is obviously passionate, so it's a good idea to foster that passion and utilize it to make the library better and get kickstarted with the digital asset management process. Secondly, generally we find that it's best for organizations to have a set program or regular funded plan for digital asset management. But this is perhaps less useful in small public libraries. In fact, I argue that periodically applying for grants allows a small library strapped on time to have more flexibility. Finally, although this is a little nitpicky, I would suggest the EPL do some workshopping on its mission statement, making sure to outline how preserving access to historical materials is valuable to its patron base. This develops a great tool for persuading those with financial resources to support the digitization process. I also wanted to talk briefly about the broader impact of my project. I believe my case study is useful as a model for other small rural libraries. Showing how a library like the EPL can still participate in digital asset management, despite tight restrictions and limited resources, can inspire other institutions to be similarly creative in initiating digital projects. My project also touches on the value of local history collections at public libraries. Often these collections are overlooked, as they are rarely digitized or accessible online. The public is more likely to gravitate toward and assign value to collections from large institutions that are highly visible in the online sphere. But public libraries hold materials that are dearly treasured by the community the library serves. Without these collections, townspeople lose access to their heritage and to a feeling of connection to their town and community. My project also discusses the role of community collaboration, which I believe is less likely to be discussed in the context of digital asset management, especially in large, well-funded institutions. And that's it, and thank you for listening. And here are my references. Thank you.